Hi, welcome to the farm. Thank you for stopping by to watch this video. Today we are going to be working on changing some coats on the sheep, and we do this periodically with the younger sheep because they tend to outgrow their coats, and also checking to replace any coats that'll have holes in them because we want to make sure there's no vegetative matter getting on the wool. So we use the coats to keep the sheep clean. And then while we're doing that, we're also going to be checking their feet and doing any trimming that's required. So it's good practice to keep your sheep's hooves nicely trimmed. It just fosters good foot health and it's more comfortable for the sheep. So I'll be working on that today. These are the ewes that we're going to be working on today. So the first thing is I have to catch one of them. And we're going to work on Lucretia first. So my sheep are pretty much trained on the shepherd's crook. They know to stop when I get them around the neck. And then we put them up on this stand when we work on them. It's safer for the sheep for them to be immobilized, and it's also safer for us as the shepherd to have the sheep under control on the stand. Okay. So the purpose is really just to keep her safe and immobilized, and you can see she's not up against the stand, so she's got plenty of space. There's no compression of her neck on the stand. So this is Lucretia, and she's out of Ilara, who is a white ewe, and John Snow is the sire. He's a gray catnugget. And when I quickly look at her, obviously she needs a new coat because she ripped a hole in this one. And also, you can see she's got a good amount of britch that's outside of the coat, and you really want the coat to sort of cover that britch wool. So we're gonna upgrade her. Right now she's in a white coat, and the next coat up, based on the color coding scheme, is red. So we'll be switching her out of the white coat and putting her in a red coat. Here's the coat, and it's got two straps for her back legs and a hole for the head, and that's really the only thing that keeps the coat on. And again, we're just protecting the wool, keeping it nice and clean so our hand spinners have a beautiful product to work with. So we always start with the back leg first. I tuck her foot in the strap. That's another good sign that it's time to switch when the straps are nice and snug. Okay, so I got the back straps off, and then there's always that beautiful reveal where you get to look at the nice, clean, soft and crimpy fleece. So pretty. Now I have to take the little chain off so we can take this off of her head. There you are. And now we'll be putting the red coat on. Red is one of the biggest sizes that we use. This is so again, I'm going to reach into the strap, grab her foot. So it's good, it's covering the bridge. To me, I think she's probably close to going up to the next size. So the neck wool is not covered, and as I talked about in my earlier segment, the neck wool I preserve its skirting and pool it in all the other white fleeces, but I just want you to kind of get a look at just the debris that collects in the neck wool compared to the wool that we saw under the coat. Okay, let's get you back up in there now. All right, so now she's got her nice new coat on, and now we're gonna trim her feet. She's definitely ready for a trimming. You can see the nail, or the hoof coating is coming over the soft bed. You want it so the two sides of her hoof are flush with that soft pad. There's probably a little more I can take off there. I tend to be conservative because you can cut it so close that it will bleed a little bit, so you want to be careful about that. We spent the rest of the afternoon doing the same thing with all the other ewes. One thing I love about changing the coats is you get a chance to look at the wool and the sheep and just sort of see how they are progressing with growing out their fleeces. All of my yearling ewes now have correctly fitting coats and nicely trimmed feet. We coat our sheep because we want the fleeces to be nice and clean for our hand spinners. But one of the problems with the coats is they don't cover the wool on the neck. The neck wool tends to get really dirty because it's not covered by the coat, which is unfortunate because the neck wool is the softest and the crimpiest wool on the whole fleece. Also, there's a lot of wool in the neck. So what I do is I hand flick it very carefully and then decide, depending on the length of the fibers, whether I'm going to turn it into bats or if I'm going to spin it into hand spun yarn. So what I'll do is when I'm skirting, I will separate the neck wool from the rest of the fleece, and then I'll put it in different bags depending on the color. And then later on, when I have time, I'll go ahead and wash those fleeces and card them and get them ready for either putting them into bats or spinning them into yarn. So I've washed this batch of neck wool, and this is black. And what we have here is two necks, I guess, two used necks wool. So this is how much wool you get with the wool that's not covered by the coat. So it's going to have, it's going to have extra little bits of hay and stuff in it, and it's just because, like I said, it's not covered by the coat. So what I'll do after I have it washed and dried is I'll just flick this by the lock. So I'll just show you what that looks like when I just pull out a lock, and I hold on to it by the tip with my thumb and forefinger. Open up the skin side, and then I open up the tip side. And that is ready to spin. This particular lock is a little bit on the short side for me to card for hand spinners to enjoy in a 1 ounce bat. And the reason it's a little bit short is it's possible that it might have come from maybe the area closer to the cheek where the staple length isn't as long, or maybe it was a little bit on the underside where, again, it has a little bit more wear, so there may not be as much staple length. So this one I'm going to put in, sorted into a basket for me to hand spin. Beautiful. And that's the amount of waste that I end up with. That was 2 locks that I spun. And you can see there's, you know, little bits of hay and little bits of poo, maybe some dung in there. So that's all been flicked out, and that will go into the discard pile. This is the Magicraft flicker card. This comes with the drum carder when you purchase a drum carder, and it's used to clean the drum. And it's also really handy for this purpose, which is just, you know, getting your locks prepped for either putting on the drum carder or spinning from the lock. There are going to be parts of the fleece that are just far too dirty for me to flick. It's not worth the effort. It'll just never really come clean. So what I do with those is I sort those into a separate pile of wool by color. So this is my black basket here, although there's a little pitch of white in there. And what I'll do with this then is I'll put this in a pool of black wool that will then go to the mill and get processed into comb top. So it's easier for the factory to take this and make it into something that we can spin with. So this lock is nice and long, very nice for making 1-ounce bats. So what I'll do with this is I will go ahead and put it on my drum carder once I get a full ounce of locks. And that's how I will begin the process of making the 1-ounce bats. So I'll turn this fiber into either 1-ounce bats that I will then offer to hand spinners to spin into yarn, and I also will spin it into yarn, but I'm not able to identify the individual ewe that provided the wool to make the bat. So what I'll do is I'll just provide a group shot of the sheep in our flock with information about the color and the weight, but I don't have individual sheep information. After I get about 1 ounce of flicked locks, or a good amount, enough to make it worthwhile to sit down and start to spin, I will spin. Usually I'm going to do 2-ply DK sport weight yarn with the neck wool because it is so very fine and crimpy. And I'm going to be using my Magicraft Pioneer wheel to go ahead and spin these locks. I always spin from the skin side first. I feel that that just gives me the most consistent singles. So nothing is wasted. Every bit of wool on our sheep is very precious and can be turned into really lovely wool for a hand spinner or a knitter to enjoy. I have so many wool projects going on all over the house, so I wanted to give you an update on all the stuff that I'm working on right now with the wool from our sheep. And I'm in the laundry room here. This is where I have my utility tub, and this is where I do all my washing of my fleeces and scouring. So today I'm working on fleece from our ewe, Mrs. Hughes. And Mrs. Hughes, last year, we put her in a breeding group, but she didn't get bred. And that's significant because the year before, she did get bred, and I was able to rue her fleece really easily. She had a very clean break between the prior year and the new year's growth that I was able to pluck the fiber from her body, and that is a great fleece when you can rue them. Well, this year, because she didn't get bred, there wasn't as good of a break, and so I started to rue her, and because it was coming off so difficult, I decided instead to cut her fleece off with a pair of scissors. I couldn't get her sheared because the shearer had already come and left, and so I was sort of stuck with having to cut it off with a pair of scissors, so it took me quite a long time. So the fleece is kind of a hybrid of rued and sheared. But one of the things that I love about Mrs. Hughes' wool, I love how she's got very tightly coiled tips. And that works really well for this new type of yarn I'm making. I call it the Bumbly yarn. It's a lock spun yarn. So I'm just spinning the fleece without carding or anything. And it's just really, it comes out really cool. And her fleece is a really nice dark gray, so really pretty. So I'm washing this up, and the goal is then to take it and spin it up into a lock spun yarn, and then I knit it up into a really fun bumbly hat. So working on this right now, I've got some of it already washed, and because I had to cut it off with scissors, it was really, took me forever, so I did it in stages. So I have like 4 bags of wool from Mrs. Hughes over the different days that I worked on it. So this one I washed it yesterday. I just need to do a couple more rinse cycles, and I'll be putting this outside to dry today. It's a beautiful sunny day today, so it should work out really nicely. So that's what I've got going on here where I'm washing fleeces. This is my knitting chair, so the TV's right there, and I'll sit here at night and do my knitting. And right now I'm working on a hat that's made from yarn that I lock spun from RU Koki. She has a fairly short fleece. It's extremely fine and crimpy though. So I'm kind of on this kick with this lock spinning, and this I made just from her fleece spinning the locks, and it worked out really well. Because it is so fine and crimpy, I was really able to get a nice lofty yarn. It's very bouncy and squishy. And then I applied it with a single of some of her fiber that I was able to spin really fine, and just applied it just to give it some integrity to make it easy to knit. And it's a simple pattern that I just created. It's my barn hat pattern. So you cast on 60 stitches with this heavier gauge. Size 6 needles, circular. I do a rib stitch for about 2.5 inches and then just stockinette. And I try to keep my needles really loose because the wool is very bulky. So I wanted to try and make a hat with Koki's wool. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. And it never fails how you think you're spinning something that looks awful. But once you knit it, it really turns, it's like a magic spell or something. It just turns into something that you really like. And this I'm loving. Mainly I'm loving just how thick and bulky and squishy it is. It's going to be really nice and warm. So that's what's on the needles. I'm pretty much done. I've only got a couple more inches. Then I'm going to be doing, knitting stitches together to make the crown. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how this is working out. Today I'm spinning black neck wool, and I'm spinning it from the lock. on my vintage Magicraft Rose wheel using a standard E-flyer, and I just had one of the older brown bobbins on here. So I'm spinning this into a 2-ply yarn. DK Sport Weight typically is how it ends up. This is just going to go up in the shop. So I'm out of hand spun. I can't remember. I think it was at Rhinebeck. It was at Rhinebeck. I met a lot of great people, and there were some people there that had never tried our hand spun or had never seen it, and so they kind of fell in love with it, and I ended up selling pretty much most of it to them. I kind of wonder what they're going to do with it, what they're making. It was a woman from California, and then her friend who was more local to Rhinebeck. So yes, I have a fiber festival, a small festival coming up in February. So I'll want to have some hand spun for that. And also I have just recently started going to the Buffalo Knitting Guild meetings, and they've graciously invited me to be a vendor there, so I wanted to have some hand spun for that event as well. So that's what this will be going to. So I have flicked up a good amount of locks. I'm still working on flicking them and just spinning as I go, filling up the bobbins. So I'm down here in the wool cave, nice and dark and quiet, and I am in the process of flick carding this black neck wool. I showed you in the earlier clip of me spinning it, but before I can spin it, I flick it with my Magicraft flick carder, and I flick it by the lock. This is really soft and crimpy. I don't know who it's from, but this is what it looks like before I flick it. And now I'm going to take my Magicraft flicker, which has already got some waste wool on here from the other locks I've been spinning. And I am just going to card it now to get a beautiful lock of fiber that I can spin. Normally when I'm doing this down here, I have the television on. And at this point in time, I am binging, this is embarrassing, I am binging old episodes of ER. I watched the first 2 seasons of it, and then I think I was busy having kids or something and just dropped off, and I always liked it, so I'm back. I think I'm in season 5. I believe there's like 18, I don't know how many seasons there are, it's crazy. There's the beautiful lock. So this will take me a little bit. I'll probably get through all of this wool in probably the next week, and then get it spun up and washed and marked. Always something. Okay, so this project is a little bit unconventional even for me. It has to do with waste wool. So in the past, I was not using as much of the wool as I do now. So for example, if there was some wool that the locks were really tightly coiled and I couldn't flick it out, that would go into the compost pile or whatever. And anything that was particularly coarse or coarser than my superfine stuff, that also would go into compost. I started taking that wool that was washed and filling it into these old t-shirts, thinking that I would use them for pillows, you know, knit pillow covers, and then stuff them with these, which I never ended up doing anything with that. But now I'm using a lot more of the waste wool, the stuff that's not super fine and, you know, nice for spinning. And I'm using I'm slightly less fine wool that's washed in my comb top. So I'm sorting a lot more wool into the comb top because I never had comb top before. I'm using a lot of it in, if it's really curly, I used to dispose of it before because I couldn't get the flicker through it. But now what I do is I use that for either making my needle felted sheep kits or spinning the locks or even offering it in 1 ounce washed packages if it was fairly free of VM. So I'm kind of curious. I feel like I'm doing a bit of a scavenger hunt. I've got 3 of these pillow forms that I want to go through, and I thought it would be kind of fun to video it so that you could see what I find in my hunt. So I got this one here to start with. And this bag here is what I'm going to use to put stuff that is, yes, it is actually waste, not usable, probably flicking waste. And that will go to Xylingers, and they take that and they make quilt batting with it. So again, I'm pretty much using everything. So I'm not sure what I want to find in here. This could be a bust. So the boys went through t-shirts like crazy as they were growing. And so I hated throwing those out as well. So I would, okay, here we go. This looks like I would have discarded this. Now obviously it's extremely dirty. But I put this in here because it was too dirty and I wasn't able to get it flicked. But, I mean, first of all, it's pretty gray, right? And that is a nice staple length. That's good for comb top. So, that's the other thing too, is I'm at the point in time this year where I am pretty much out of wool. I don't have very much laying around to do stuff with. So, kinda just looking for stuff that I can use in projects to keep me occupied between now and when we shear. So this is all going to go into my gray comb top bin. So I use these laundry sorting bins for any wool that I decide while I'm hand flicking that it needs to go into the comb top. It gets sorted into comb top. So I have them sorted by color because I have 5 colors of comb top that I offer. So I've got the black and the white here. And here I have gray, fawn, and moret. So later in the spring, when it comes time to skirt fleeces, I'll combine this with that. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the gray bin. I don't know, it looks like flicking waste, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm putting this in comb top. I'm sorting this and putting it into the comb top pile. And this I could put in the black. I'm always shy of black wool. So it was too dirty for me to do by hand, but it's not too dirty for the comb top. Yeah, this is definitely was a good idea to go through all this stuff. All right, what else is there in here? Just shorter gray locks. That's pretty. I'm gonna guess I probably put this aside because I thought that it was too coarse. But it's beautiful gray, and that is gonna go into comb top. Good heavens. This has been hiding out all this time. I don't know, I've had these weird pillow thingies for probably a couple of years. And there's a lot of stuff in here. How dirty that is. Super curly, silvery white. These little coils, I'm going to put those with my sheep kits to make little lambs. But a lot has changed since I used to do this in terms of coming up with uses for this wool. So there's a lot more here, a lot more potential than I thought I had. Let's put that up there for now. I'm actually very excited. So here's another thing. I probably was carting away and just said, you know what, this isn't very nice. It's too dirty. It's not as soft as the rest of the fleece. So just tossed it. But yeah, all these are definitely things I'm going to put into my comb top. So I'll sort them by color later. Let's see what else is in there. Oh my goodness, look at that. Really tightly coiled bits of brown. A bunch of gray. I don't know why I have so much gray. The minimum length for comb top is, there's some really curly bits. Let's sort that out. It's like 1 to 2 inches. And it's more about, you know, if you send really short stuff, it's going to probably become waste. So, you know, to do it at your own peril. There's some nice curly bits of gray. There's an enormous section of brown in here. Oh my gosh. I honestly did not think I was gonna find this much treasure in here. I thought it was gonna be mostly flicking waste, but it isn't. Well, I'm not gonna sort through all this on the video, but just, oh my goodness. What was I thinking? You know, perfect comb top material here. Super curly bits. For heaven's sake. All right, well, this is actually more of a project than I thought it was going to be. Can't get over myself. I'm not even going to open the other one. Only because I just know there's so much good stuff in here. Look at there, I tried flicking it. Got discouraged probably. This is a project, a fun sorting project. It'll be good for when my hands are tired from spinning or flicking. Finally, the other thing I'm working on, the last thing I wanted to show you was, once I get the yarns spun, well, washed, flicked, spun, everything, plied, and they are ready for use, then there's a whole other step, which is getting the weights, the yardage, and creating the label. I always like to put a picture of the sheep on the label if I can. Getting that printed, and then also I have to put it on my e-commerce site, because like I said, these are things I'm going to be offering at upcoming events or on my website, and everything needs to go through that. But here's some finished skeins of yarn that I've been working on. This one was an experiment, and it's off of one of the gray Rude fleeces that I actually ended up making a bumbly yarn with, instead of trying to spin it 2-ply, because it had quite a bit of texture. But this was just trying to spin a Rude lamb fleece without carding it. So that's nice, it's pretty gray. Now I have 2 skeins that I've made so far from Mrs. Hughes, and these are plied with, trying to think, I think I had a black fine single on a spindle somewhere. So I plied the textured lock spun with a black single. So these are 2 skeins that are going to be enough to make a hat like this, kind of a bulky hat. This just uses it's just got the trim, because I had like a butt end of a skein. So this is actually some long draw wool yarn from my ram's roving, and then I trimmed it with the bumbly yarn, which also works really cute. And it's almost like a little fur trim, very decorative and cute. So these are 2 skeins enough to make a hat, and then there would be some leftovers that you could use for a trim. So those have to get marked, and these I actually also put a pattern with them for this hat. And then I have these 3 beautiful white skeins of neck wool. So once again, we don't know who the donor is, but just so pretty and soft and bouncy. And I have a very good friend. She lives in Rochester, and she asked me to make her some white yarn. Oh, it's so pretty. Very elastic. So I gotta, like I said, I gotta weigh this, count out how many yards I've got. If I had to guess, I would say I've got maybe 225 yards in each of the skeins. Just a 2-ply, very, very lustrous and beautiful. So, got a lot going on, and I'm loving every second of it. This is just, labor of love, and very, very fortunate. So thank you for stopping by to watch the video. Please, if you want to help me out, remember to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.